Good morning. I recognize most of you, but I am Kelly Allen. And when I was first asked to speak this morning about this scripture and about moments where I've felt God, or God moments as we like to call them, I thought, well, that's easy. I mean, as Christians, haven't we been raised to see God in everyone and everything? Aren't we encouraged to live in these God moments all the time? Well, I don't know about for you, but for me, that's sometimes easier said than done. And as I began thinking of a moment to share with you, I found myself becoming pretty reflective. Yesterday marked a huge milestone in my life. I graduated from IU and got to celebrate with my family and friends. As I sat in commencement and waited for the numerous graduates to file into Assembly Hall, I began thinking of all the things that I have learned and experienced here in Bloomington over the past 4 years. And I realized my time here would have been profoundly different had I not found this place. I'll never forget, almost 4 years ago, gosh, that seems so like yesterday in some senses, I moved in to Briscoe Quad at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. And the first thing we did after we got all of my things in my room is my family brought me here. And I'll never forget, she's here this morning, the first person I remember seeing when we walked in the door was Kathy Street. And she was so willing to come up to my parents and make them feel better, I think, about me coming here, and made me feel a lot better about being in a place where I didn't know many people. I'd known Kathy's daughter Jackie through camp, and just to see a familiar face and to know that someone else was here looking out for me when I didn't have mom and dad just a few feet away was so comforting to me. I've grown up in the same church my whole life in Jeffersonville, and I've always cherished that church family, and I thought that when I went to college I would lose that part of my life, and I learned that it just moved from Jeffersonville into Bloomington. My sophomore year, I was given the privilege, thanks to your love and support, to help kind of restart we call it DSF, or a Disciples Student Fellowship. And that's just a time where college students can get together, and we do Bible studies sometimes, but just be in fellowship with one another and be a support system that we so desperately need when we're away from home. My good friend Adulis and I were able to kind of kick that back up, and that first year, it was so great to see rekindle friendships that we had made from camp and make new friends and be able to share in this fellowship time. As many of you know, this semester I've been home student teaching, and I have been back a few Sundays here and there, and I just have to say thank you so much for all those who greeted me with a warm smile or a hug or a "how's it going, tell me about it," because I think you touched me in ways that I never thought a place that wasn't home could ever do for me. So I guess my God moment, or should I say moments, have come from you. You've taught me that it isn't always the big things or moments that profoundly impact others. It's the little ways. So today, you could be someone's God moment just like you were 4 years ago to me, and how you've continued to be that for me today. And you never know how it may change someone's life. So thank you, First Christian Bloomington, for being my home away from home and for showing me God in Bloomington, Indiana.
Good morning. My name is Lorna Steele, and I'm a senior here at IU Bloomington. Picture this, a small village without electricity or running water. Children running around unclothed, not because of the ungodly heat or humidity, but because they simply didn't have clothes to wear. Everywhere you look is another starving person. The village priest is desperate for help with the reconstruction of the new church and the community in general. This is where I found myself at the age of 16. I had gone on a mission trip with my hometown church to El Salvador. To say I was overwhelmed is the understatement of the century. I spent the next 10 days working in a village. Well, okay, I let all the men do the hard work. I spent my time playing with the children and connecting with the locals, which was harder than it sounds when you consider the language barrier. I had 1 year of high school Spanish under my belt, and it wasn't near enough. I knew basic phrases and vocab words, but that didn't stop the children from playing duck, duck, goose, or pato, pato, gonzo, as they call it, with me for hours and hours on end on the cold cement floor of their church. It was a little harder to connect with the older kids and adults that were too old for the childhood game, but we conversed the best we could. They would all just sit at the church doors and watch us play this silly game. At the end of the week, my church group had chosen me to present the village with the gifts we brought them, just little toys from McDonald's and Burger King, and some necessities for their new church. When I opened my mouth, I only got a few words out before the tears started. I had a translator, but I'm sure he couldn't understand me through the tears either. I was crying because I felt so bad that I was leaving to go back home to everything that these people would never have in their whole life. I felt very guilty. After I said my piece and the service was over, all the children and girls and women came up to me to hug me and comfort me. I'm sure they didn't understand a word I said or why I was crying, but they cared so much that I was upset that they stayed right next to me, holding my hands and rubbing my back, wiping away my tears until they ceased. It was almost 7 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I'll never forget the lessons I learned on that trip. I may not have helped with all the sweaty manual labor the whole time, but I made friends. Friends who taught me that no matter the situation or circumstance, you can always make friends. I'm pretty sure I developed my passion for God and helping people in El Salvador. I promised myself that in memory of my friends, I would always try and help people in one way or another. After El Salvador, I've gone on a mission trip every year. I've counseled camps and led youth groups and Sunday schools, made tons of awesome friends along the way. I made one more promise to myself as I drove away from that impoverished village that day. I promised myself that I would come back to visit my friends, because it isn't always the hard work that matters the most. Sometimes it's the relationships you build and the lifelong friends you make.
Good morning. God moments don't only happen in churches and in sanctuaries. God moments happen in places where you find most holy. For Kelly, it's in the church community. For Lorna, it's on mission trips. For me, I find my God moments during times of self-reflection. I think this is because I view practicing religion as personal, intimate, and private. And this is why my favorite place for self-reflection is Camp Bedford. Now, for those of you who don't know, Camp Bedford is a magical place. It is a place where you send your kids for a week or 2 days, get them out of your hair, and all the kids would rather stay there forever and ever. I've met most of my best friends there, and I attended camp every summer from 2nd grade through my senior year of high school. When I say Camp Bedford is a special place, I really mean it. Last summer, I was given the chance to work at the camp as a cook. And if I'm being honest, I was hoping to recapture some of the magic I had felt as a camper. This was because I had recently began to attend the DSF group and really reconnect with my camp friends at IU during the previous school year. I have to say, I did not regain the magic of being a camper. I found myself alone a lot in my free time while my friends were busy being counselors. The loneliness was not what I had in mind, and certainly did not live up to my hopes for the summer. This led me to wandering down to the field late one night. For those of you who don't know, at Camp Bedford, the field, the weather for some reason is always perfect. The sky is always the clearest I've ever seen, and there are more stars in that portion of sky than I think I've ever seen anywhere else. I must reiterate again that Camp Bedford is a special place. Now, my friends know this night as the night that I got chased out of the field by a coyote. But the real reason that I went down there to that field that night was because I felt lost in my mind and in myself. These past years of college, I have not been the ideal member of this congregation, and I have not, or an ideal Christian. You could say I was taking a break from church. On that night, in that field, the wrong things I have done, the people I have ignored, the stresses and pains of my life seemed to boil and explode in a cry of remorse. I prayed, really prayed, alone. And that was the first time I'd prayed in many, many years. Staring at that sky, asking why had I made the choices I had? Why did I shut people I love out of my personal life? Why couldn't I let my life pains go? I stood in the middle of the field, looking at the sky, staring past the stars into the unknown, and just cried. In that moment of complete vulnerability, I was given a calm, a self-peace that I hadn't felt in a very long time. I'm not going to go as far as to say that God spoke down in his mighty voice from the heavens and said, "Be calm, you are forgiven." But I do believe that God wanted me in that field and wanted that vulnerability to appear. He sent me the answer that I needed. It's not an answer I could put into words, but I just felt calm. I felt as though I'd been given a new direction to take my life in. And then, as if to say, "Get out of here, go to bed, stop crying," a coyote did appear and chase me out of the field. My God moments happen during times of self-reflection. My God moments happen under the stars and with a coyote. The field at night at Camp Bedford is my holy place. I challenge you to go out and find yours.
For those of you who have joined the church in the past six years, I'm Allison Anari. I am daughter of Helen, sister to Sam and Jonathan, and daughter of Sarah Sopa. I have not graduated from IU. I am in my second year of divinity school at Vanderbilt University, and as such, the resident theologian in training, I was told to bring it home and have a theological message for you all. So, thank you to Kelly and Sam and Lorna, and here's the exegesis. So, in many ways, the early church Paul is writing to in Corinth is very similar to the church today. No, they didn't have smartphones or iPads. They didn't come to their church in their old Hondas or their new Kias. But the early church was full of diverse people, full of very different ideas surrounding the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that is precisely why Paul is writing this letter. A lot of people forget that Corinthians is, in fact, a letter written to people and to a community. So, what prompts this letter, you see, is word that this Christian community, one that started out with a common goal, had divided loyalties among different church leaders. And it is with this that Paul writes of God's wisdom. I think we can all agree on the fact that God's wisdom is exceedingly larger than human wisdom. Older than time, God's wisdom can be so hard to understand that it can be described as secret or hidden or mysterious. With the Spirit in the world, though, we have those moments where we can hear God's wisdom and feel God's love. And when we catch even a glimpse of that wisdom through the Spirit, we want more and more. It's a different way to focus our lives. And as you've heard from people, it can be difficult to be open to hearing God's wisdom or feeling God's love all the time. With ads telling you that you need this or you must have that, it's easy to fall into the trap of living into the world's desires, following the world's wisdom and not God's. And it makes sense. The world's wisdom is physical and tangible and real. The Spirit, not so much. But because of that, it is important to find those places where you can hear God, feel the Spirit moving, and see the face of Christ more easily. For many in this church, that place was and is camp. Camp was a place where Christ's teachings are physical and tangible and real. It is a place where social iniquities are less present because everyone has a place to sleep, enough to eat, and a community that loves them. It is a place not where God speaks more loudly or the Spirit moves more forcefully, but where we allow ourselves to be more open, to listen carefully, and experience God's love more fully. It is a place where people from all over the state are united, but are not the same. Gifts are shared and celebrated for their difference. We are not forced to be the same. I think that is what Paul was most worried about. As Christians, we must be united in Christ. That message rings just as true today as it did to the people in Corinth. God's wisdom may be revealed in different ways to different people, and that's okay. But God's wisdom allows us to realize and claim that we belong to Christ and no one else. We may belong to the Disciples of Christ Church, and our neighbors may belong to the Methodists or the Presbyterian churches, but we all belong to Christ. We may belong to different political parties or take different stances on political issues, but we all belong to Christ. And because we belong to Christ, we have true wisdom of God. However, that does not mean that we have all the truth or knowledge. Yet, no matter where we go or what we do, God will always be there, waiting to share God's love and wisdom. It's up to us to listen and share it with others through words and actions. Amen.